Our next speaker is one of those people. Speaking of the people who can help, Kenney Enney is running for Paso Robles School Board. There are 6 others if you get elected, right?
Correct.
6 others, and he will be the voice of reason, because I think the rest of, well, no, there's a couple, but there will be a couple voices of reason on there, but that is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make sure that the school board has these voices of reason on there, because right now we're not seeing too much in the effort of helping our kids learn and be safe. So without further ado, Kenney Enney.
Good evening, everybody. I really want to start out first by thanking everyone for your well wishes, your prayers, and all your support. And it's honestly, it's been quite humbling. I've told people this all the time. I have absolutely no interest in being in politics, but here I am. And I would say probably one of the reasons why I'm here is since this is a Tea Party meeting, I can quote the founding fathers and not upset anybody. But you know, if we look at the founding fathers, you know, one of my favorite quotes from Thomas Jefferson was, "An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people." We have to educate that next population or the next generation. They're critical. We can have all the money in the world. We can have the best army in the world. We can have win every battle and every war. But if that next generation doesn't believe in us as a nation, we're over. It's done, and we're rapidly going down that road right now. I want to go off my script just for a second. I had the opportunity to meet Teo the other day, Norma's son, and I'll tell you, impressive young man. He's got a bright future. The thing that impressed me the most is he's teaching himself Arabic. So that in and of itself, having been in charge of language training for the Marine Corps, I found quite impressive. So Teo's going to start learning how to be a ranch hand part-time when he's not homeschooling. But I think it's important that we start figuring out how to reconnect all the different links that have been broken in our local community, and you know, start providing the young men and women outlets besides sitting on one of these in a room all by themselves. So I'm going to try to focus my talk tonight from the bottom up. So starting locally, here's our situation in the Paso Robles Joint Unified School District. Class of 2023 is going to graduate in June. They're going to have a 94% graduation rate, but only 25% are going to be proficient in math. So my question is, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where we as a community consider that acceptable? And how do we get to the point where nobody knew that only 25% of the student body was going to be proficient in math? We got here, one, because you had I think a deliberate effort on the part of the teachers union and the education mafia to essentially squelch that information. They don't measure, their metrics for success are not how well you do with reading, writing, and arithmetic. Their measurement for success is whether you graduate. Why is that? They get money based off of attendance. They don't get money based off of how well you do in school. And that's what's got to be fixed. When you look, you know, again, going back to Thomas Jefferson, I'm glad they're no. I always throw Thomas Jefferson out because I figure that's how you flush out the wokesters, because they get upset when they hear his name. But Thomas Jefferson, the other thing that he advocated for was the first universal public education system in the United States. Now, he only thought you needed to go up through 8th grade. But he said the purpose of a public education system should be to train a skilled force, a skilled labor force, teach you the basic disciplines of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and create a common citizenry for the nation. Are we doing any of those right now? No, we've failed at all three of those. We are not doing any of that. That's why you see more and more people leaving the public school system. Paso Robles Joint Unified School District, $13,817 per student per year. But the best you can get is a 25% math proficiency rate. So let's put that in business terms. I'm sure most of us have business experience. Many of you had your own successful businesses. But if only 1 out of 4 of your products met standard, how long would you stay in business? Not very long. And if it was a publicly traded company and you had a board of trustees that allowed a CEO to stay in that position and mismanage that production facility, how long would that CEO stay in position? He wouldn't. Otherwise, the shareholders would get rid of the board of trustees because the board of trustees won't get rid of the CEO. We don't look at education as a business, and we should. The community is who's supposed to be benefiting from Paso Robles High School. We are supposed to, when you look at those 75% of graduates this June, what are they going to do when they get out of high school? Well, it's probably safe to assume that most of that 25% is going to go off to college. How many are going to come back? That 75% are going to be the ones that most likely stay here. And right now, when I've had the opportunity to talk with some great teachers. I had breakfast on Saturday with a couple. I think the number I was told is between Skills USA and the vocational programs and the FFA, there are about 800 students out of the roughly 2,500 at Paso High School. I'm not worried about them. I think they probably have their stuff wired. They got strong family values, and they're pretty sure they know what they're doing in life. But you still have about 1,000 students in that high school, or let's just break it to the high school senior class of 400. So you've got probably 25% that are going to be FFA, Skills USA, and you've got 25% they're going to be going to college. What's that other 50% going to do? They have no skills. They haven't met the basic disciplines. And they probably can't agree amongst themselves what's the difference between a man and a woman anymore. I mean, we're failing on all fronts. That 50% is really who we're going to be left with. And they're going to get riverfront property under the Highway 46 bridge at the intersection of 101 and 46. Okay, going back to Thomas Jefferson, why is it vital that we have an educated population? They have to understand what their rights are. They have to understand what the Constitution allows them to do and doesn't allow them to do. And they have to have the basic skill sets to be contributing members of society. And that's where we're failing. I'm not going to blame teachers for this. I'm not going to necessarily blame the bureaucrats for this. I'm blaming all of us because we've allowed it to happen. It's complacency on our part. We've never asked the hard questions. I went last Tuesday to poke the school board in the eye. It's a bad habit I have. But it was the first time I could recall, and Dorian may correct me, but I probably watched a dozen YouTube videos of school board meetings. I attended 4 as a citizen, and I attended 3 as a board member. Last Tuesday was the first time I ever heard anybody from the public talk about academics. We talked about the proper shade of crimson for the football jerseys. We talked about swimming pools. We talked about all sorts of stuff except what the core disciplines of that school, of what a public school system are supposed to provide. And that's, basic academics. So the message is getting out there. People are starting to understand. And I think that's kind of a threat to a lot of people on the left. And one, because they have a nice little, I break the teachers union and the bureaucrats into 2 groups. There are those that covered their backsides, and there are those that feather their nests. That's kind of the bulk of the people there. A lot of the teachers I've talked to are afraid to speak up. They're afraid of retaliation. A lot of the teachers I spoke to talk about the gang violence, and some of the stories I'm hearing make me even more concerned than I was before. You have students that come and go only during the lunch period because that's when they can sell drugs. And the picture that is being painted to me, or has been painted to me over the last couple of weeks, is that honestly at the high school, they've lost control. You have groups that break into safe zones, or safe spaces they call them, during lunch. So it's not just the LGBTQ community that has a safe zone where they can go and hang out and not worry about being targeted by anybody. It's FFA, it's Skills USA, it's all sorts of different groups. And that's no way to allow a high school to operate, especially in Paso Robles, California. The stories I'm hearing are stories that I would expect to hear from East LA or Oakland. And we're allowing it to take place here. And we as a community are gonna have to solve it. We can't leave it up to the bureaucrats. I'll wrap up real quick and take questions. But I keep asking people, how do we get here? Nobody seems to know what the problems are in the school district. And I can tell you, we've trusted the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy has taken advantage of that trust. And we have elected officials, and those elected officials, whether they're the school board or the supervisors or the legislators, their responsibility is to represent us and our interests, not the interests of the bureaucracy or the establishment. And when I look more and more at some of the emails that have been provided to me about this special election, it is evident to me that there was a conspiracy between the teachers union and members of the bureaucracy in the education community here. And it was made most clear to me in one email, which I'm not going to read to you, but the catch line of the email was that essentially it was from a lady whose name is Carrie Alvord Schaff. She was the one that was probably involved in posting links to pornographic sites on the district webpage. But she was also involved in collecting the signatures for the recall. And in a public records request, there were 11 emails that she sent out during working hours, which leads one to conclude it was during the working day on a government computer, which is against the law. But one that really caught my eye and I enjoyed the most was one in which she is speaking with Jim Brescia, lambasting Kurt DeBost because Kurt DeBost informed the school board about the petition. Well, that's the one that concerns me the most because it shows her contempt for the elected officials. When you read that whole email, it was evident that she wanted to keep this secret, and she resented the fact that it had been made public to the school board. Well, the school boards they're the electeds. And so that's what we're facing. We have to understand that the viewpoint of the bureaucracy is that the elected officials are potted plants. They're there for window dressing. They're there to make the people think that they have a say. And it's gotten to that point because we've allowed it to happen. Because we go in and we complain about the color of crimson of the football jerseys and things like that, vice the fact that only 25% of the graduating class is going to meet the standards of math. So I will focus on the things that are important, and that is primarily the safety issue. There has to be zero tolerance for any gang activity. There has to be zero tolerance for any drug activity. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I would argue that it's probably going to get a lot better before it gets worse in this community.
I think you said that backwards.
A lot worse than better. Thank you. People in the listening audience would be going, what? It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better because we've lost control of our borders. This is a major intersection between north-south and east-west corridors. Gang members at the high school and middle school level are basically tied into cartels down in Mexico. That's the way it's always been worked. And you will start seeing, you saw probably in the mid 2000s, you had major gang wars in Salinas and Santa Maria because you had large agricultural populations there. Paso Robles has always been sort of a coveted area because of the intersection of 46 and 101. And if we don't start paying attention to it, it's probably, it will be worse. And the drugs will be coming in, and as we start sending mixed messages to our youth that we don't want you to do drugs, but we're gonna open up marijuana shops on Spring Street. When we start sending mixed messages like that, you're gonna probably start seeing, it's gonna probably take a tragedy, I'm afraid, before people wake up and decide enough is enough. So I appreciate your support. Prayers are most welcome, but really I think what we need is just to get the word out. Tell people about the election. I'm still amazed that there are people that don't know about it. I'm just focused on the core traditional American constituents. I'm not going to try to convince the teachers union or anybody else at this point that I'm right and they're wrong. So, but anyways, thank you.
All right, do we have any questions? Thank you, Kenny. Okay, he's going to answer a few questions, so anybody who wants to ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll come over and hold the mic up. So. Always on the other side of the room.
Thank you. I don't live in Paso Robles, but I certainly will be praying for this situation. I would like to know the date of the election.
Ballots will go out on the 20th of March, and the election is the 18th. You have to have your ballots in by the 18th of April.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I like that you have a lot of signs out. I think you're doing a great job, but what is this oak tree thing? And do you need to take your signs down? And I know the other side is looking for anything, so I'll help you get some new signs, but I just wanted to know what was happening with that.
Thank you.
Great question.
So the oak tree issue.
She was a plant.
So the oak tree issue started probably about 3 weeks after I put the signs up. And before so my signs have a variation of the Paso Robles School District logo on it. And I checked with lawyers ahead of time, Chuck Bell, who used to be the state GOP lawyer. And there are no copyrights, there are no trademarks, there is no district policy on use of logos, and so we felt it was safe to put the sign up. Materials went out, got the first email from the district, and I responded that, I checked with Chuck Bell again, and Chuck Bell's response was, no, fair use. You're not violating any copyright, trademark policies, and you have right to use this under fair use. That was the response that went back to the district. The district sent another email basically saying that I had 48 hours to take signs down, destroy all materials. And at that point I said, I will modify the big signs, but I'm not destroying anything, I'm not taking anything down. So that's when they published their little piece in the Paso Daily Press. And my question, it's a rhetorical question, but my question is, where was the outrage when they posted pornographic material on the district webpage? Why? This is like the biggest thing since, I'm calling it Logo Gate. They've made it this huge issue. But when you actually had children who were put in harm's way, they didn't want to say a word to anybody. I mean, I was in Kurt DeBose's office saying, you need to send a press release out telling parents that their kids may have gone into a chat room with 13 to 24-year-olds to discuss sex. They would not do it. But by God, you better not use that oak tree.
Kenny, do you remember my remark about that logo?
No, sir.
Well, the prior superintendent hired somebody to put the logo up at the football field. And you know what is on the bottom of that logo, don't you?
Excellence, and they spelled it wrong.
They did. They spelled it wrong.
Well, I did ask. I said, if I spell it with an A, will it be okay?
Anyway, the other thing is, I was aghast because I knew Julian Crocker and all of his subsequent people involved, and I actually knew Jim Brushy when he was at the St. Rose, and the thing that disturbed me is all those superintendents have never endorsed another candidate ever before. Why are they endorsing your opponent?
Well, my honest opinion is, again, it gets back into my theory of you have two camps. You have the CYA camp and the Feather Your Nest camp. And I'm afraid that when you start looking at the establishment, Brescia, Sane, Crocker, they share some blame in the current state of affairs. And I intend to hold everybody accountable. We have to fix this. And accountability really starts at the top. You have to clean out the top, and you have to make sure people know where mistakes were made, and then you have to fix them. I'm afraid that's probably why. I've never met any of them. The only time I ever talked to Jim Brescia when he was
Personally acquainted with all of them.
well, when he called to say that hey, we're booting you, I said okay. That was about the length of the conversation, sir. So.
Last question right here.
Okay, Kenny, you mentioned 25% proficiency rate. How about reading and reading and English? And where can we get that information that we
If
can
you go,
use
if
as
you go,
ammunition
actually, if you go to my
ourselves?
webpage now, I've got it linked off of there.
Say the name of your webpage.
It's Kenney Enney, 4, PRJUSD.com. But if you go to the State Department of Education, you can search all the school districts and all the schools. And the most recent scores up there are 21-22. So I'm gonna mix up the district-wide English and the high school and the senior class English, but one's 50% and one's 52%. The highest English proficiency is Independence High School. They're at 60-something%. But within the last 2 years, you had a 15 percentage point drop in math. You had since 2017, having talked to some teachers, there was an effort to move out the old guard of sort of traditionalist teachers. And at that point, you can see a distinctive 15 percentage point drop in English scores as well. So,
Okay, this is really the last question.
yes, sir.
Really not a question, it's a comment. If I remember my history right, 18th of April in '75 was Paul Revere's ride.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I was saying that I was the Paul Revere. Well, thank you very much.